The Girl in the Old Coat. The Woman Who Became Professor of Medicine. The Coat. Leeds, England. A January morning. The coat was older than she was. It had belonged to her grandmother first, a heavy wool thing in a faded shade of bottle green that had once been vibrant and was now the color of a field after a long summer. The stitching at the left cuff had been coming undone since Yasmin was 9 years old. She had been restitching it, carefully, with whatever thread she could find, every 6 months since she was 12. The coat had been repaired so many times that the repair itself had become the coat. She wore it to university every single day for 3 years. She wore it through Leeds winters that cut like a scalpel. She wore it past the students in their new North Face jackets and their confident, warm-looking layers. She wore it to morning lectures at 8 o'clock when the breath fogged in the corridors of the medical school building and the heating system was still deciding whether to engage. She wore it, and she said nothing about it, because the coat was warm enough, and because she was not at the University of Leeds to discuss her coat. She was there to become a doctor. Some people wear their poverty quietly. Yasmin Rashid wore hers like armor. Who is Yasmin Rashid? Chapeltown, Leeds. The beginning. Yasmin Farah Rashid was born in Chapeltown, the second of 4 children of a Somali British woman named Hodan, who worked double shifts as a hospital healthcare assistant, and a Pakistani British father named Tariq, who had come to Leeds at 22 to study electrical engineering, stayed for Hodan, and spent the next 20 years working at a print shop that was always 6 weeks from closing and never quite did. They lived in a terrace house on Reginald Street that smelled of cardamom and damp carpet and the specific warmth of a household that has more love than space and more ambition than money. Yasmin was 7 when she decided she would be a doctor. Not because she had a television program about surgery or a relative who was a consultant. She decided because of her mother. Hodan Rashid came home every night from the hospital with the particular exhaustion of someone who has spent 12 hours doing important work at the bottom of a hierarchy that does not always notice her. She came home and she cooked dinner, and she asked her children about their homework, and she never, in Yasmin's memory, complained. But Yasmin watched her mother move through the world, capable, caring, precise, doing things that the nurses and doctors above her could not have managed without, and understood something that a 7-year-old should perhaps not have been required to understand, that the system she was part of did not reflect what she was worth. Yasmin decided she would fix that, not in a grand political sense, in the specific, actionable sense of a child who has set her mind on something. Yasmin: Mom, I'm going to be the consultant. Hodan: Are you? I'm going to be the professor. Hodan looked at her daughter for a long moment, in the way of a woman who has learnt that some things deserve to be taken seriously when they are said. Hodan: Then you better start now. She was right. The weight of the coat. Nobody in Yasmin's family had been to university. Nobody on Reginald Street had, as far as she knew. The concept was not abstract to her. She had been to the university open day at 14, had stood in the atrium of the medical school building and looked at the photographs of graduates on the wall and felt a hunger so physical she had been embarrassed by it. But the path to it was genuinely unclear. She made it clear herself. She read everything. She asked questions of every teacher who would answer them. She sat in the school library at lunch when other students went to the common room, not because she was antisocial, but because there was a copy of Kumar and Clark's Clinical Medicine on the reference shelf that she had been reading slowly and carefully since the 3rd form. She did not understand half of it. She kept reading. The secondary school she attended was not well resourced. The biology lab had equipment from the 1990s. The chemistry teacher left midway through her AS levels and was replaced by a supply teacher who was excellent and then not replaced when that supply teacher left. There was one careers advisor for 800 students. Yasmin achieved 4 A stars at A level. She applied to the University of Leeds School of Medicine. She was called for interview on a Tuesday morning in January. She wore the green coat. She sat in the interview room with 2 consultants across the table and answered questions about her motivation, her understanding of the medical profession, and an ethical scenario involving a non-compliant patient. Her answers were precise, considered, and delivered with the specific clarity of someone who has been thinking about these questions for a long time. She was offered a place the following week. She stood in the kitchen of the Reginald Street Terrace with the letter in her hand and her mother standing beside her, and Hodan Rashid, who had never once in Yasmin's memory cried in front of her children, leaned against the kitchen counter and wept quietly into her hands. Yasmin put her arm around and held on. The medical school years. Medical school was the hardest thing she had ever done. She knew it would be. She had read accounts of it, had talked to junior doctors at the hospital where her mother worked, and prepared herself for the volume of material and the pace of delivery, and the particular stress of clinical placements where you were simultaneously learning and trying to not harm anyone.
She had not fully prepared for the loneliness. Not the absence of friends. She made friends, good ones. Priya Sharma from Leicester, who became her study partner and closest confidant. Ben Hughes from Sheffield, who was funny in the way of people who have been through things and found absurdity on the other side. Amara Williams from Birmingham, who would go on to become a cardiologist and who in the first year had spotted Yasmin restitching the coat cuff in the library and had said nothing, simply sat down and begun working on her own notes, which was the kindest possible response. The loneliness was the specific loneliness of being the only person in many rooms who was there on a full bursary, who worked weekend shifts at a Chapeltown café to cover food costs, who did not go home in the holidays because home was an hour's journey and the train fare required calculation. The loneliness of being the first, of not seeing your own story in the walls and the photographs and the histories of the institution you were trying to join. She kept working. She kept the coat. She kept reading. In her 3rd year, she attended a lecture by Professor Diana Singh, a consultant hepatologist who had grown up in Birmingham, the daughter of Punjabi immigrants, and who had published foundational research on liver disease in South Asian populations in the UK. The lecture was on health inequalities in chronic disease. Yasmin sat in the 3rd row and took notes with the specific, focused attention of someone who was not only learning, but recognizing. After the lecture, she went to speak to Professor Singh. Yasmin, your research on health disparities in South Asian communities, the access barriers to early diagnosis, I want to understand how you designed the cohort study. Professor Singh looked at her, the focused look of a person who is deciding whether this is a student who wants credit or a student who wants to understand. Prof. Singh, come to my office on Thursday morning. Bring your research methods notes. Yasmin was there at 8:30. She had been there since 8. The turning point. The relationship between Yasmin and Professor Singh did not follow the neat arc of a mentorship story. It was more complicated and more useful than that. Professor Singh was demanding, exacting, and constitutionally unable to accept imprecision. She pushed Yasmin's thinking beyond what Yasmin had believed her thinking was capable of, and she did it not by encouraging her, but by refusing to be satisfied with less than the best version of whatever Yasmin produced. Yasmin responded to this the way she had always responded to difficulty, by working harder and more precisely. She qualified as a doctor in June of her 5th year. She walked across the stage in the Great Hall of the University of Leeds to collect her medical degree in the green coat, because the ceremony was in June and the coat was not needed for warmth that day, but because she was not ready to let it go yet, not until she had finished what the coat had accompanied her through. Her mother was in the 5th row. Tariq was beside her. Her 3 siblings, Safia, Omar, and Nasreen, were beside them in their best clothes. Hodan Rashid watched her daughter walk across the stage and receive the degree, and did not weep this time. She simply sat very straight and pressed both hands together in her lap and looked at the thing she had raised. The coat went into a box that evening. Yasmin folded it carefully, re-stitched the cuff one final time, and packed it away. She would not need it for the next part. The next part was work. The professor. Professor Yasmin Farah Rashid holds the chair in respiratory medicine at the University of Leeds. She is 41 years old. She is the first person of Somali heritage to hold a professorial chair in clinical medicine at any Russell Group university in the United Kingdom. She did not note this statistic in her inaugural lecture. She mentioned it once in passing in an interview and said, "It should not still be notable. That it is notable is the problem I am working on." Her research focuses on the intersection of respiratory disease and structural poverty, specifically the relationship between poor housing conditions, air quality, and the dramatically higher rates of severe asthma and COPD in communities like the one she grew up in. Her work has influenced clinical guidelines and public health policy. She has published 43 peer-reviewed papers. She has trained 11 PhD students, 3 of whom have gone on to hold their own academic posts. Every year on the first day of the new cohort of medical students, she gives the same short address. She does not use notes. She speaks for 8 minutes about where she came from: Chapeltown, Reginald Street, the terrace that smelled of cardamom and damp carpet, her mother who came home exhausted from the hospital and never complained. She speaks about the coat. She holds nothing back. She says to the new students, in the same room where she once sat and took notes in a coat that was older than her, "The system has not been designed for all of you equally. Some of you will be working against structural disadvantages your classmates will never experience. That is not fair, and I'm not going to pretend it is. What I can tell you is this: the disadvantage is real, but it is not the whole story. The coat does not determine the doctor." After the lecture, she always stays for an hour. She speaks to every student who wants to speak to her. She particularly looks for the ones who are sitting quietly at the back, the ones who seem to be listening most carefully. Those, in her experience, are often the ones who have the most to say. Lesson: what the coat teaches. Yasmin does not speak in platitudes. When she is asked what she would tell young people from backgrounds like hers, she answers with the precision of a clinician, specific, honest, without false comfort. Number 1. The institution was not built for you. Enter it anyway. The University of Leeds was not designed with Yasmin Rashid in mind. The photographs on the wall did not look like her. The history did not contain her. She entered anyway, because what matters is not whether the institution was built for you, but what you build inside it. Number 2. Dedication is not inspiration. It is practice. Yasmin was not always inspired. She was tired and underfunded, and sometimes lonely. She studied because studying was what she had decided to do, and she did not require the right emotion to do it. Dedication is a daily decision, not a feeling. Number 3. Your background is not your ceiling, it is your material. Everything Yasmin knew about poverty, about structural inequality, about what it cost to be the first, she brought it into her research. Her background did not limit her work, it defined the questions her work asked. The coat does not determine the doctor determines the doctor. All the rest is weather.